60s were a crazy time in America. JFK was assassinated in Dallas. We were entrenched in Vietnam, a war that deeply divided the nation. The civil rights movement was in full swing. And from 1963 to 1969, our 36th president, Lyndon Baines Johnson, was apparently showing his dick to just about everyone who set foot in the Oval Office. You heard that right. Get ready for a rock-hard, fully erect edition of Timesuck.
You're listening to Timesuck.
All right. I couldn't be more excited about this episode. Today's topic was suggested by Timesucker and my cousin, Matt Cummins, out of Wyoming, which makes it that much funnier to me that he was the guy who turned me on to this. I had no idea about LBJ and his genital fascination. So we're gonna learn a little about LBJ overall in this episode, and a lot about an entity known as Jumbo. So let's, pun intended, get right into the meat of today's episode. This is easily the most ridiculous episode of Timesuck so far. That's ridiculous with a K snuck in there. Pun again intended. Not a big pun guy, but yeah, it's dick jokes. It's dick jokes today, a little bit. Okay, so we're just going to start off with a variety of tales about LBJ and his genitals, his comfort level with nudity at the Oval Office and the White House, and just in general. And these are all things that I researched pretty thoroughly. There was a few things that were showing up, just like bullshitty, like Reddit threads and things that I completely discounted. All of these things that I found were things that showed up in numerous articles and were written by, like professional journalists or biographers who, had like New York Times book reviews and things. It wasn't just like, Frank Fuckstick on, Facebook was like, LBJ put his dick in a beagle butt. It's like, oh, that's not news. That's not true. So these are pretty. They're so just outrageous. I had a hard time believing that some of them were true. But let's start off with this first one. And remember, this is the president. This is, the 60s, which were, a crazy time in America for sure, with the big counterculture revolution. But we're not talking about like hippies and stuff. We're talking about a middle-aged man from Texas in the White House. First story. Apparently, he just liked to kind of piss, wherever he felt like it. And so like if he was outside around like, let's say the House office building in D.C., if the urge, struck him, Secret Service guys are around, he would just, pee in the parking lot, and he would refer to his dick as Jumbo. And there's one account of him shaking it off in front of a Secret Service member and asking him, "Have you ever seen anything as big as this?" And he would also oblige aides to take dictation, take some notes, standing at the door of his office bathroom while the door was opening, while he was just taking a shit, like some weird alpha male ritual assertion of his being leader of the pack or something, just so primal. And this is actually, there's a movie with Bryan Cranston, an HBO movie, that I'll come up with the title later in this episode. I have it in all my notes, and I'm just blanking on it right now. But Brian, there's a scene when they do this where Bryan Cranston as LBJ sits down and just takes a shit with the door open, just as people are, senior staff are hanging around him, and you can tell like they're just like, God damn it, this happens all the time. Okay, so that's something he was doing. He got naked during an Air Force One interview, apparently. Leader of the free world, LBJ, aboard Air Force One, standing in front of reporters, naked as a jaybird. I guess to be fair, it was a hot, sunny day. And he wasn't a shy guy. And this was he invited White House reporter Frank Cormier and two colleagues to an impromptu news conference in the presidential quarters, according to Cormier's book LBJ: The Way He Was. And Cormier described Johnson just shucking off his underwear as if nothing unusual was going on, and he continued to talk to reporters while standing buck naked and waving his towel for emphasis. So I guess he had a shower and just was like, "Hey, let's talk. I'm not ready to put my clothes on yet." Robert Caro, the two-time Pulitzer Prize-winning author who's written 4 parts of a 5-part biography series on LBJ called The Years of Lyndon Johnson, shared this in a 2000 interview with Stephen Colbert. Quote, he had a great respect for his penis. Caro laughed. When he was president, he liked to urinate off the back porch of his ranch. One night, a Secret Service man says, Mr. President, you ought to look out for rattlesnakes. He says, rattlesnakes, and then refers to his penis and says, it is part rattlesnake. Now, here's the most outrageous one to me. And this again, there's another LBJ biography called Flawed Giant, written by Robert Dallek. It was written up in the New York Times, legitimate book. And this is from that. This fucking blows me away. And a lot of web articles reference this. Quote, during a private conversation with some reporters who pressed him to explain why we were in Vietnam, Johnson lost his patience. According to Arthur Goldberg, briefly a Supreme Court justice, he was an ambassador to the United Nations under LBJ. LBJ, quote, unzipped his fly, drew out his substantial organ, and declared, this is why. Do you hear what I'm saying? The President of the United States talking about, the most important thing going on in the United States at that time is like, well, why are we in Vietnam? Fucking my dick is why we're in Vietnam. Can you imagine if Obama did that? If Obama, he would be fucking impeached. He would have been impeached if he would have done that. Maybe Trump can get away with it, which I think, shows that there definitely is still some racism in the country. If the black president would have whipped out his dick and be like, this is why we're in fucking Afghanistan, motherfucker. My fucking dick is why we're over there. Are you kidding me? That would be, Fox News. Fox News pundits, their fucking heads would literally explode. They'd be so goddamn excited to talk about that. And just so enraged. Okay, so that's something. Apparently, he would go skinny dipping with ambassadors. In a recent biography of Lyndon B. Johnson, Robert Dallek in Flawed Giant, says... He said that ambassadors calling to present their credentials sometimes had a closer acquaintance than they were expecting. It was Mr. Johnson's occasional practice to invite new envoys for a swim in the small indoor pool built for FDR. Skinny dipping was a long-established tradition which allowed the president to establish genital dominance at the start of a diplomatic relationship. So, it wasn't unheard of for presidents, in previous years to skinny dip in there, but it was, I guess, this was like his first impression. It's like, yeah, you want to talk about some politics? All right, well, you're going to stare at Jumbo. Jumbo's going to keep an eye on you while we discuss. And then again, the shitting whole. The movie is goddamn All the Way. It's a movie that I was talking about earlier with Bryan Cranston, where he plays LBJ. He won a Tony for the Broadway version of All the Way. And I just had that pop in my head. Okay. So this guy wasn't just fixated on his genitals for show either. Apparently, he had a voracious sexual appetite, and like a lot of dudes in power, desire for sexual conquest, which I knew about like JFK. I mean, I think everybody with Marilyn Monroe and Happy Birthday, Mr. President, and all this stuff, everybody knew he was a womanizing kind of dude. But you see LBJ, and sorry, with JFK, he was a very good-looking dude, very charismatic. He looked like a ladies' man. LBJ looked like your country uncle who asked you to pull his finger. He did not look like a sexual dude at all. But apparently, according to Bill Moyer, who was a special assistant to Johnson from 63 to 67, he said that Johnson had an unfillable hole in his ego. Feelings of emptiness spurred him to eat, drink, smoke to excess. Sexual conquest also helped fill the void. He was a competitive womanizer. And this next thing is referenced all over the web in numerous articles. When people would mention Kennedy's many affairs, he'd like fucking bang on the table, do shit like that. And I guess he loved to say that he had more women by accident than Kennedy ever had on purpose. So he's a competitive fucking guy. And he just by all accounts, he just seemed earthy would be the nice way to say it, but he just a very primal guy, and again, he didn't, I guess for some, in my mind, didn't look like it, but a guy who, just like a, kind of in an old school way, a man's man almost in a way, where he liked to drink a lot of fucking whiskey, he liked to smoke, he liked to fucking pee off the back porch, take a shit whenever he wanted, he liked to, he liked the ladies, and like talk, like locker room talk, but it's just crazy. It did not match, I guess. I don't know who I thought he was, but when I'd hear LBJ, I would, kind of think of Nam and think of, JFK assassination, but I wasn't thinking of this fucking hard drinking, porch pissing, swinging dick guy. He was a big dude, for a president too. He's like 6'2", 6'3", 210, 230 in there, broad-shouldered guy. And I guess he was also known for kind of like close talking people. Bryan Cranston does that in the movie too. But he did a lot of these things just to kind of fucking rattle people. I guess he was a really good student of human nature and intimidate them. He does sound like, no wonder Cranston, after playing Walter White in Breaking Bad, chose LBJ to fixate on. Like, he does seem fascinating, where he was this big fucking Texan, hard-drinking Texan who'd got in your fucking face, who wasn't afraid to show you his dick, talk about how big it was, wasn't afraid to take a shit right in front of you. That is like a gorilla type thing to me, I mean, can you imagine if your boss at your work pulled you into the office and, talk about, like, you wanted to talk about a raise, and he's like, yeah, we can talk about it. And then he just fucking drops trow all the way, kind of wags his dick around, and he's got a big dick, sits down, takes a shit. It's just like openly taking a shit and looking you in the eye at the same time, and then be like, yeah, let's talk. So what do you want to talk about? What do you think? Why do you think I should give you some more money? That would be unnerving as hell. Oh my God. But I don't want to paint a picture that he was just like some fucking maniac either. He was a good guy in a lot of ways. He did struggle over, U.S.'s involvement of Vietnam. Apparently that weighed very heavily on his conscience. Lady Bird Johnson, the first lady, his wife, remembers the president's pain over the war. Quote, he had no stomach for it, she said. Quote, no heart for it. It wasn't the war he wanted. It was something that we were involved in before he got into the Oval Office, by the way. The one he wanted was on poverty and ignorance and disease. And that was worth putting your life into. She added, it was just a hell of a thorn stuck in his throat. It wouldn't come up. It wouldn't go down. It was just pure hell, and he did not have that reassuring, strong feeling that this is right, that he had when he was in a crunch with civil rights or poverty or education. It didn't have that, we'll make it through this one, win or lose, it's the right thing to do, feeling. So much uncertainty. We had a rich dose of that. True, you can bear any burden, pay any price if you're sure you're doing right, but if you do not know what is right, her voice trails off. The opposition provoked in the United States by the expanding war spoke to Johnson's hesitations and forebodings, but criticism made him more rather than less reluctant to consult his doubts. So he was and we'll find out here in just a bit. He was did a lot of stuff, especially with civil rights and especially with like education and poverty. He wasn't just all about dick, but he was a lot about his dick as well. So before we get into more just kind of weird shit about Johnson, let's paint a fuller picture of him. I think let's do a little Timesuck timeline.
Strap on those boots, soldier. We're marching down a Timesuck timeline.
All right, August 27th, 1908, Lyndon Baines Johnson is born in a small farmhouse in Stonewall, Texas, a tiny town of roughly like 500 people, mostly known for having the best peaches in Texas, which, who the fuck thinks about peaches in Texas? So, not a lot going on. His father, Samuel Ely Johnson Jr., was a cotton farmer, also served as a member of the Texas House of Representatives. At the time of LBJ's birth, he was a populist Democrat known for taking on big business and essentially standing up for the little guy, so, that type of politics in his blood. I know nothing about the size of his dad's dick, so we don't know where that comes from. 1913, after the price of cotton plummeted from 40 cents to 6 cents per pound, the family loses the farm, moves to nearby Johnson City, a town of a little over 1,000 people, known for not quite being as much of a shithole as Stonewall. Yep. 1924, he graduates from Johnson High School at the age of 15. While he is the youngest kid to graduate, it's not like he's some prodigy. This is a school that had 6 kids in his class. None of them probably learned a lot. And I say that because LBJ, was like the top of that little class of 6, and he still wasn't able to get into Southwest Texas State Teachers College, which isn't exactly Harvard, after graduating. So, he and 5 friends, they pitched in, bought a car, drove to California, and fucked around for a while as a teenager. I love that, He's like 15. That's good. Think about how different the times were, too. 15 years old. You try and do that. Some 15-year-old does that now. The people are going to report him missing. It's going to be fucking Amber Alert going off on all of our phones. Nah, man. Back then in the 20s, it's like, well, good luck, son. You and your friends have fun fucking trying to live out in California where we can only speak to you via telegraph or some shit. So he does that. He goes around, he just fucks around for a while, working odd jobs, chasing tail, I'm sure. God knows how many people saw his dick during his time out west. I'm guessing Jumbo was living the California dream. 1925, the very next year, LBJ returns to Johnson City, Texas. He probably misses his family. Maybe he's broke. I don't know. Nothing, no specifics there. But he returns to work on a road construction crew, and while there's no record, undoubtedly constantly exposes his dick to both coworkers and passerby alike. I'm speculating. 1927, LBJ refocuses his life, gets into the illustrious Southwest Texas State Teachers College, now known as Texas State University San Marcos. And he helps to pay his way through school by working as a janitor, as an office assistant. I think that's pretty fucking cool, man. From janitor to the White House. Badass. That is the American dream right there. He drops out for a year to teach 5th through 7th graders while he's going to school there in the Mexican-American town of Cotulla, Texas, a town that has recently experienced an oil and natural gas boom in our time, but in the late 20s was just another dusty backwater Texas town with enough humidity to keep Jumbo semi-permanently stuck to LBJ's hefty sack and or thigh. And I'm guessing it was a town kind of hard up for teachers just to take a guy who doesn't even have his degree yet. Maybe that was the norm for the time. 1930, LBJ gets his bachelor's in teaching, still teaches in Cotulla, where he is, by all accounts, a phenomenal teacher who must have kept his cock and balls in his pants, at least on school grounds during classroom hours. 1931, through his dad's political connections, locally there in Texas, he lands a job in D.C. as an aide to U.S. Congressman Richard Kleberg of Corpus Christi, where he does an exemplary job, not one word about his privates from this time. 1934, LBJ returns to Texas, meets the well-to-do Claudia Lady Bird Taylor, nicknamed because as a baby, her nanny thought she looked as pretty as a lady bird, marries her 3 months later, and immediately, one can only imagine, begins relentlessly and tirelessly pounding her with Jumbo. Just fucking Jumbo is just working Lady Bird. You can be assured of that in the Texas heat. Just Texas heat and dick and Lady Bird in 1934. 1937, he uses his wife's inheritance to help win a seat in Congress from his home district and is able to bring electricity. Sorry. I hate to be that guy, but I do crack myself up sometimes. Just thinking about all that dick and Lady Bird. I'm like a permanent 8th grader in some ways. Okay, anyway, 1937, he uses his wife's inheritance to help win a seat in Congress from his home district and is able to bring electricity to his hometown. An achievement, I guess this is kind of, speaks to how sensitive he was in some ways. That was his proudest achievement, he would say, in later years, was, bringing electricity to little old tiny Stonewall, Texas. So that is pretty cool. And just kind of shows you how different the times were. I mean, God, this guy, he grew up, without even electricity as a kid. Again, cool American dream there. No electricity to the White House. And it's not like there was an age when there was no electricity. They just didn't have it in that shithole town. 1941, he's still a member of Congress, and he's appointed as the Congressional Inspector of the War's Progress, World War II that would be, in the Pacific. He even goes on a bombing run. 1944, first of 2 daughters is born. And in 1947, the second of his 2 daughters is born. There's no mention of anything I can find about him exposing his dick and or balls to either daughter ever in an appropriate manner. So that's good. So his Jumbo does have some limits. That's nice to know. 1948, he wins a seat in the Senate, beating a popular Texas governor for the party nomination. In the process, serves in the Senate, becoming Majority Whip in 1951, an apt title, as you can be damn sure he was whipping out Jumbo on a semi-regular basis by this point. He was known as a womanizer, and you can as a fair amount of interns received some of that South Texas sausage, some of that spicy sausage. He's a Democratic Senate. So I think I was trying to combine Kennedy and Senate. He's a Democratic Senate minority leader from 53 to 55. The Democratic Senate, majority leader from 55 to 61. Even surviving a heart attack in 55 to do so. Thankfully, he recovered, and he and Jumbo were as healthy and active as ever after that. And then, 1960, LBJ tries to win the Democratic nomination for president, but loses to an even more impressive nickname, JFK, John fucking Kennedy. Not sure I have his middle name right here, but I'm positive about the initial. And even though JFK beats him, the young Catholic taps the older Protestant LBJ as his running mate to balance out the ticket, and they defeat VP Richard Tricky Dick Nixon to win the presidency. Think about that for a second. The vice presidency goes from Tricky Dick to Jumbo. And JFK is banging any woman under the age of 30 to walk onto the White House grounds. Wild fucking times at the White House in the 60s. We all get Man, people got all fucking crazy about Clinton in the 90s. He was not doing shit compared to what was going on in the 60s. JFK would have fucking laughed his ass off about, really? Well, what? You put one unlit cigar in an intern's vagina and the Congress is trying to impeach you? Are you kidding me? I fucked members of Congress now as president. I don't know. I don't know if he did that, but maybe. Okay, 1963, Kennedy is killed in Dallas by who gives a shit. I'm so tired of that conspiracy theory. Once again, Texas is kind to LBJ. Gives him the throne. Thanks, Texas. Does also give him the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement, which were fairly stressful to deal with. 1964 to 1973, LBJ does run for president in 64, receives the largest share of the popular vote in history to that point, just over 61%. But then after dealing with all the turmoil of Vietnam during his, first, actual full term, which he escalated with the Tonkin Resolution that gave him the power to use full military might against North Vietnamese without ever officially declaring war, not a popular decision with everyone. He chose not to run for re-election in 68, then died back in Texas just 5 years later in 73 at the young age of 64. And his incredibly well-preserved, and some say breathtaking, magnificent cock is on display right now at the Smithsonian. It'll be there through June. That is not true. I read that on an article that exists only in my imagination. How fucking great would that be, though? That would be a museum piece I'd be interested. Someone was like, we got Kennedy's, we got JFK's, the bloody shirt he wore when he was assassinated. Like, that's pretty intense. Maybe I don't know. I might go to that. And they're like, also LBJ's cock. We have LBJ's taxidermied cock on display. I'd be like, yeah, all right. I'm curious. I'll check out Jumbo. Yeah, I've never seen me a taxidermied cock before, let alone a president's, let alone some Texas sausage presidency cock. Okay. So, while president, he did pass a lot of very important legislation, such as Medicare, Medicaid, the voting rights, which balanced tactics or banned tactics used by southern states to block African Americans from voting. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act provided grade schools and high schools with federal funding for the first time. Passed the Civil Rights Act in 1964, which outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin. Ended unequal application of voter registration requirements and racial segregation in schools, the workplace, and facilities that serve the general public. All right. So there you go. There's a timeline for you.
Good job, soldier. You made it back. Barely.
All right. So now we have a fuller picture of LBJ. Right? Now we know a little bit about what he did during his presidency, where he came from, impoverished Texas roots. He went to war while he was in Congress. That's pretty goddamn impressive. He's a sentimental guy, still thinking of his little Texas town and took care of it. I mean, I think that's really cool. He's got some loyalty. But that's not what you're listening for. That's not what I set up in the beginning. This isn't about all that, shiny happy stuff. This is about dick. This is about weird shit. And so I think we need to get into some weird facts.
Weird facts.
All right, weird fact number 1 today. This has nothing to do with wieners. This is a thing that got him in a lot of trouble that just showed up in a lot of articles that I found. Is LBJ apparently like to lift up his beagles by their ears. He got in a lot of trouble when in 1964, on April 27th, he was walking his beagles outside the White House along various members of the press, and to the shock of those present, just bent down, grabbed one of his dogs. This pair of dogs, they were named Him and Her, and he grabbed him, picked him up by the ears. And the photo was published in Life magazine and caused a fair amount of uproar amongst animal activists around the country, and just kind of people in general were like, dude, what the fuck? Dogs don't like that. Like, I have a dog now I'm very excited about. I have a little dog, Penny, who's asleep right now, so I should not say her name again during this podcast. She's right behind me, little son of a bitch. She's cute as hell. I get frustrated with her. Would never even think to pick her up by the ears. And I don't know a lot about dogs, to be totally honest. But there was also articles about how he loved his dogs. There's even, if you go on YouTube, There was a vinyl record pressed a couple years after he died called Dogs Have Always Been My Friends from LPJ, like a spoken word record where he just talks about dogs. How fucking boring were the times back then compared to now when people were willing to buy a vinyl record of a dead president, talking about dogs. Who the fuck was buying that? Like, how, what? How I can't even begin to understand that, but that's a real thing. Okay. Weird fact number 2, he was nearly killed in World War II, which I do think that's odd for a guy who was in Congress, that apparently he went on like one bombing run, and he boarded a plane called the Wabash Cannonball for his mission. But then a last-second trip off of that plane to use the bathroom saved his life. On his return from the facilities, he boarded another plane that survived the mission. The Wabash Cannonball crashed with a total loss of life. So the plane he was supposed to get on at first, crash. Everyone dies. That's crazy. History would have been fairly different. Jumbo would have died early, and kind of funny after all we've learned about him and his bathroom policies that he had to go take a shit or wave his dick around at the urinal and ask people if they've seen anything as big as this, and then. So Jumbo I'm gonna go with the this isn't a fact, but in my mind, Jumbo saved his life. Jumbo wasn't ready to go. Jumbo sensed something. Primal Jumbo sensed that there was something wrong with that plane. And Jumbo was like, "Hey, come on, hey, Lyndon, hey, come on, hey, buddy, hey, let's not get on that. Let's go. Let's go show your dick around. Show me around." I don't know why Jumbo refers to himself as a different entity. Jumbo's like, "Hey, just come on. There's some service guys over there. They probably have some hot secretaries they know, and you show me, and then they'll talk about me to them, and then we're in there, buddy. Come on." I don't know. Here's a much weirder one. Weird fact number 3. There's a lot of references to this on various articles about him. He had a shower nozzle, a very expensive shower nozzle, installed for his balls. He actually had several shower nozzles put into the White House, premier bathroom. According to former Bloomberg White House correspondent Kate Brower in her new book, The Residence, Inside the Private World of the White House, Johnson wanted to talk specifically about the shower. Mr. West, if you can't get that shower of mine fixed, he said, I'm going to go, and this is talking to some guy who's in charge of fixing shit, I'm going to have to go back to move to the Elms, which is where his private residence was in D.C. His preferred shower in the Elms mansion had several nozzles that shot out water with needle-like intensity and had water pressure at the equivalent of a fire hose. One nozzle was positioned to shoot up this is a quote from her book. One nozzle was positioned to shoot up the president's rear while another aimed directly at his penis. He nicknamed that shower head sprayer Jumbo. Of course he did. Jumbo for Jumbo. Along with aggressive shower heads, Jumbo requested the installation of a light switch that could flip for either hot or cold water. He did not want to have warm water in the shower. You have it hot or you have it cold. You have it cold if you need to cool Jumbo down, or if Jumbo needs to get fucking ripping and roaring, you put on the heat. You put a little heat on Jumbo. Or maybe up the butt. I don't know what that does. I've never heard of anybody wanting a shower nozzle that shoots up their ass. I don't know. Maybe he had a good experience with the bidet. And I guess he got real pissed. They were having trouble getting this installed the way he wanted it. And he said, "If I can move 10,000 troops in a day, you can certainly fix the bathroom any way I want it." Holy shit. Number 4, he didn't give a shit who he pissed in front of. We've kind of already touched about this, but Representative Wingate Lucas, Democratic Texas, said on one occasion in the parking lot of the White House building, "I remember once we were walking across the lot and some female secretaries were behind us, and LBJ just stopped and began to piss right in front of them." That was not an accident. Oh, man. He's like, "Hey, check this out. Check out this dick. Check out my cock." The president is doing this. Number 5 is he once had a candid call with his tailor called the bunghole phone call. This is on YouTube if you want to listen to it. I don't think it's that great. It's the most commonly known weird thing about LBJ from his presidency. But basically all it is he has a talk with his tailor, and at one point he says he needs a little more room around his bunghole. And bunghole is his word, by the way. It's funny, but yeah, I think the dick stuff's more fascinating. I just include it because I know if I don't mention it, I feel like people will be like, "Hey, man, you should have talked about the bunghole call." Well, okay. There, I was talked about it. Last one, number 6, his dick, balls, and butthole were apparently always itchy. He frequently used semi-private or public displays, frequently had semi-private or public displays of affection with Jumbo, including while on the floor of the House and Senate. As historian Marshall Frady says, Emmy-winning documentary filmmaker, journalist, and author, he, quote, extravagantly would rummage away at his groin, sometimes reaching his hand through a pocket and leaning with half-lifted leg for more thorough access. Elsewhere, LBJ showed some love to his backside as well. He was continually, openly, and at length scratching his rear end quite deeply into his rear end sometimes. Jesus Christ, guy was a fucking animal. Ah, it's hilarious to me. And again, can you imagine if some camera would have caught like Obama just fucking digging in his butthole on the floor of the Senate or Congress, no less, just like fucking like leg up on the desk, just rooting in there, just really, or just like a deep pocket pool dig, just really rooting around in his dick. In the social media age we live, he would be done. He would be done. Fucking Howard Dean, when he was running for president years ago, his race ended with a scream. A microphone amplified his scream in a weird way, and he was mocked on Facebook and YouTube and everything, and it fucking killed him. LBJ got to fucking stroke himself off practically with a finger up his ass and on the floor of the Senate. Okay. Oh my God. So there's you go. That's some weird facts.
Weird facts.
So crazy stuff, fascinating. I think a lot of people, myself, are guilty of kind of putting our leaders up on pedestals. It's comforting to think that just because we don't have our shit figured out, somebody else surely does. But the more I dig into history and tales of, the most important humans to ever kind of guide our species, I realize that we're all very flawed, so fucked up in some way or another. It's comforting to know it's normal to be abnormal, though. Like I used to whip my dick out a lot in college. And then again for a few years in my early 30s when I drank too much, to be totally honest. And, some people close to me, people like my manager, and some girls I dated, frowned upon that. They thought I was being preposterously immature, just whipping my dick out at parties or the bar just to get a shocked reaction from people. And here the whole time, I was being presidential. Yeah, that's kind of nice. I was acting like an idiot, and it was fun, but I wouldn't do it again. But I can't imagine doing it in my 50s or 60s. I mean, think about how truly odd that behavior was. The guy was born in 1908, president from 63 to 69. That means he was doing all this shit I just talked about between the ages of 55 and 61. Like, my grandpa was born in 32, was only 45 when I was born. I can't imagine him, from the time I was 10 to when I was 16, just thinking about him just whipping his dick out to people, talking about Jumbo. And this was the guy, calling shots in Nam, unfucking real. I don't think anyone will ever get away with acting like this again, though. Not like I talked about. Not in the social media age. Maybe Trump. If anyone could do it, Trump could. Because I feel like some of his supporters would find it funny. Just be like, yeah, it's great, good for him. I wish I could whip my dick out when I wanted to. Yeah, that's inspiring. You can be president. You can whip your dick out whenever you want. I don't know. Fucking Obama, though, would have been impeached. But anyway, enough dick. As far as, stories, I think that pretty much sums it up. But let's recap. Let's recap what we learned in some top 5 takeaways.
Timesuck Top 5 Takeaways.
Number 1, LBJ had a butthole shower nozzle installed in the White House and a separate cock and ball shower nozzle. Thousands and thousands of dollars were spent on this. Fucking America, man. Fuck yeah. Number 2, LBJ also brought an end to legal racial discrimination. So talk about a complicated, multifaceted dude. No wonder Bryan Cranston dug into him. Number 3, LBJ whipped his dick out to explain to a reporter why we were in Nam. God, I hope that's true. If it is, it's my favorite presidential story ever. How great would that be just to reach a point in your life where that's how you can answer questions? Why didn't I take out and get away with it? Why didn't I take out the trash? Fucking this is why. Show my wife my dick. Kind of want to do that now. She would not be amused. Not be amused. I would not. People would not ignore it like they apparently ignored it with him. Number 4, he was a phenomenal teacher, gave schools federal funding for the first time in our nation's history. Not bad for a guy who shit in front of staffers. And number 5, we know that his dick is called Jumbo. Just think about that alone. We know the nickname of one of our president's dicks. And we're a first world country. Oh, man. What does that say about guys? Just even the best of us are just obsessed with our cocks. So there you go. We're just a bunch of apes who figured out how to shave and put clothes on.
Timesuck Top 5 Takeaways.
Oh, well, thanks for listening to another Timesuck, everybody. I hope you're still enjoying this as much as I am. you seem like you are from all the nice reviews I read on iTunes and comments left on timesuckpodcast.com. A lot of those lately. 98 reviews on iTunes now, so I know I have a busy 2-show week in my very near future as that hits 100. And I'm definitely hearing your feedback, and I know a lot of you have written me asking me to make the episodes longer, and I just may do that eventually. I would like to get a place where I could do 2 a week. If I can get my enough listeners, to actually kind of, make a little money on this thing, then I can justify the extra research it would take to do longer episodes and to do, maybe like a Monday shorter one, and then, later in the week, a subject that's just going to take as long as it fucking takes to get through it. So that is the goal. That is, I'm with you. And I appreciate the listening. And I do want to take a moment to actually, if you're into looking for some other podcasts, my 2 favorites are Crime and Sports. And I am biased. I know one of the hosts, but there's these 2 hosts, James and Jimmy, and they're fantastic. And I just love it. Every week they take some professional athlete who has completely fucking thrown their lives away. And it's fascinating, and they do a great job of really putting out a lot of facts, really presenting a great timeline, and just this narrative of somebody who had it all and then just epically shit it all away. It is fascinating every week. And then there is another one called A Mediocre Time with Tom and Dan, and that's one that's my favorite, kind of like guys sitting around talking to comics, bullshitting one. That's out of Orlando. Love those guys, love Mediocre Time. And I love you, time suckers. And from now on, when you think about LBJ's big swinging dick, which you will, I hope you think about me too.